Sustainability Commission is called to order. Director McCloy, would you please take the roll call?
Yes. Chair Clark?
Present.
Vice Chair Rotner?
Present.
Commissioner Alexander?
Present.
Commissioner Barrett?
Present.
Commissioner Boyd?
Present.
We have regrets from Commissioner Cohn, Commissioner Dearda. We also have regrets from Commissioner Frick.
Here.
And then we have regrets as well from Commissioner Walker. So we do have a quorum this evening.
Great. Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. Do we have anybody on Zoom?
We have the Palm Springs Post on Zoom and our YouTube live stream.
Okay, so I'd like to welcome the Palm Springs Post on Zoom and other guests that we have here tonight. The next item on the agenda is the acceptance of the agenda. The agenda and other meeting materials were distributed last Wednesday, June 18th. I'd like to point out that the fire department presentation on high-risk fire areas will not be presented tonight, and it will be rescheduled. Is there any other discussion about the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is accepted. We now move on to public comments. This time is for members of the public to address the Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. The Commission values your comments, but it cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes are allowed for each speaker. Do we have any public comment this evening?
Good evening. My name is Bob Winslow, and Ruth Cannon was going to join me, but is not here yet. I briefly wanted to introduce the inaugural Palm Springs Fix-It Fair, and it is a community event that we're initiating with Palm Springs on August 23rd, perhaps at the Mizell Center, where community members can bring items in that are broken and need repair, and we assemble as a community event volunteer fixers, and ultimately it's an opportunity for the fixers to practice their crafts and for the community to have items fixed, leaving toward, attacking a segment of the waste stream, which would be the reusable component. The fair has a very brief vision statement of beginning in Palm Springs, but we are extending from a nonprofit named Repeat Reuse that services Riverside County and the Riverside area, and what our vision is to extend to Coachella Valley, and that Ruth isn't here. Ruth lives in Banning, so we put a thumbtack in Banning as well, whether we can call it Coachella West. The event would be on, how do you close that thing? As I said, August 23rd from 10 to 2. We're delighted to have cooperation with the sustainability department here. In particular, Benito has been amazing. We got on the phone with Palm Springs Disposal, and they're ready to do anything. They did offer to put a bin there, and I think the idea is to keep the stuff out of the bin, but and Ace Hardware is a really great partner in that I'm anticipating they'll be able to supply a lot of miscellaneous materials to facilitate repair. Just something to show that's and another idea is what I'm calling a repair finder. So the event is a quarterly event, but as you can see on the repair finder, it's the opportunity to look for different categories so that anyone who has something in town that might need to be repaired can easily find it. And it just, in the past, sometimes you hit an issue where, hey, the event's quarterly, I'd like to get something mended, something leather work done, upholstery, and it just sort of starts lifting up and celebrating the repair economy. And I went through and cataloged a number of repair resources. So it's on the 23rd. I think we wanted, I'm closing now, we wanted to start small. The ones I've been involved in have had 50, 60 repairers and 300 residents showing up, and that's not the goal. Right now, the goal is to get on the other side of this event, see it as being successful, learn what the interest is, and then anticipate doing another event a quarter later. And I'm a volunteer, Ruth's a volunteer. We both are living in we met through our recovery programs, and there's an interesting analogy that as I work my own recovery, it's really exciting to be in service of repair, and it's also exciting to be part of Palm Springs showing, sustainability and good forces when there's a lot of other stuff going in the world that, we can't change. So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to present. Okay, and I know you can't comment, but the applause is deafening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Bob. We're looking forward to it.
I hope so too.
Are there any other public comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to chair's comments. And I just have one brief thing to say. I'd just like to thank again.
Okay.
Bye. I'd just like to thank the City Council for the dinner and the joint meeting that was held last Tuesday evening. There's a lot of information there. I thought it was quite interesting. So we'll move on to subcommittee reports, and the first one is Standing Subcommittee on Waste Reduction. Vice Chair Rotner.
Okay, thanks. We had a quick meeting. Palm Springs Disposal wasn't at the meeting, so we weren't able to get updates from them, but I think that's not really a major issue, as we'll get caught up at the next meeting. I did a little brief search or presentation on some research that I've been doing, finding alternative ways to recycle various items. Chair Clark and Commissioner Boyd had also added some different ways to reduce waste and recycle, and I'll be sharing that and hopefully getting some ideas. Mr. Winslow gave me some ideas on a website that might be kind of interesting to share on all the different options that are out there. So you can look at the report, and we can go from there, hopefully, and grow that as well. But that's it for now.
Any comments or questions? Just wanted to comment that the report on the alternate recycling was something that I brought up briefly during the meeting with the City Council, and I felt that there was a lot of interest within the Waste Reduction Subcommittee in pursuing that. So thank you for all the background work you've done. The next is Standing Subcommittee on Climate Action. That's me. The report on the June 11th meeting is in the agenda packet. One thing I would like to highlight, and Director McCloy will probably talk about, is that the letter about Assembly Bill 306 that we talked about extensively at the last meeting and came up with an outline for has been sent to the Senate, to the state Senate, and there has been some feedback from that. The report is in the report from the subcommittee meeting is in the agenda packet. A couple of things that we talked about extensively are the tree ordinance and the energy efficient upgrade ordinance, which will be discussed under old business this evening. And the next meeting of the subcommittee will be on July 9th. Any questions? Moving on to Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Bird Strikes. Commissioner Frick, do you have any comments?
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. Then there's the Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Leaf Blowers. That's me, Commissioners Cohn and Frick. One thing that we had talked about for publicizing information about leaf blowers is speaking to neighborhood representatives at 1PS meetings and encourage them to put something in their newsletters, the neighborhood newsletters, about the leaf blower ordinance and enforcing it. I don't know if it had been done at the most recent 1PS meeting, but I did speak to the person at Four Seasons where I live, and it turned out that they did put a little notice about enforcing the leaf blower ordinance in the newsletter for Four Seasons. So, let's see, there were 2 pending requests of staff. One is approval of the letter to the Desert Sun that we worked on a few months ago, and then discussion of enforcement with code compliance. Is there any update there?
It's all in progress,
Okay,
but I think probably regrouping sometime in the next month or so with the subcommittee. We'll be able to share the data that we've gathered.
okay, thank you. And that's all that I have on leaf blowers. Are there any comments or questions? Moving on to the Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Measure J projects, Commission Vice Chair Rotner.
Yeah, I slipped my, I have to follow up with the 2 commissioners that we're working on. I think we've kind of pivoted a little bit from the initial tract, and we're looking to develop rubrics for other departments, kind of get sustainability commission presence a little higher, but also help the various departments like Park and Rec have a guidelines like Measure J in December of last year kind of needed some information to help them. So just kind of give some advance guidance for future projects. And I need to coordinate dates with Commissioner Boyd and Commissioner Alexander. So pending, maybe start up in the fall as summer is quickly approaching, or is here. The weather's been so nice, it's kind of felt like spring. So more to come on that.
Any comments or questions? I think, if I'm correct, I think one thing that came out of the council's last meeting when they talked about the budget is they probably won't be having Measure J community projects for another 3 years. So that may impact what you do on your subcommittee.
And the name may morph into something different, I don't know.
It's
Sustainability Guidelines Subcommittee.
okay, and the final item is the new Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Pesticides and Wildlife. The members that we have are Commissioners Boyd and Frick, Vice Chair Rotner, Specialist Wheeler, Tamara Hedges, and Emmanuel Ramirez. And the reason, or the thing that I was hoping that we talk about this evening is when the committee can start coming together. If there's been any activity to find a time, and I know there's a lot of interest in having something start this summer.
So I have received times from the commissioners. We can work next month to try to schedule a meeting with the Desert Wildlife Center as well. So,
Okay, next month?
yes, July.
Okay. Great, thank you. Now we move on to the director's report. Director McCloy?
Sure. So this setup and the mic make me want to speak really slowly. I don't know why. Uncharacteristic and also not quite so loudly. So apologies if my cadence feels extra robotic. I'm very disoriented by this spatial orientation. So just a couple of things to highlight from the report and a couple of new things that are late breaking that were not known at time of publication. So just a couple of little things to highlight. We are already getting questions and interest about the shredding event. It is on October 18th. It is scheduled. It is locked and loaded there at the convention center. So for anybody who likes to pre-plan their shredding, October 18th is when that will return with the pre-shredding week in advance as well. Is there anything you want to add on shredding?
Nope.
Great. And then in terms of some other events that are happening. So Juliet and I will both be at the California Climate and Energy Collaborative Conference from July 8th to 10th. Some commissioners may remember that as the conference that was here in Palm Springs last year. It's in San Jose this year, and Juliet will be participating in a panel about her fellowship. So we look forward to forcing her to deliver an elaborate conference report upon her return at the July commission meeting. But I will be going just to absorb and see what's going on, but Juliet will be doing the heavy lifting for us at that event. And then finally, we got some news today that our very own Christian Wheeler has been selected as the only recipient this year of an arborist exchange program from the Urban Forestry Council. Remind me?
Urban Community
Thank you.
Forest Society.
Urban Community Forest Society. I apologize. So we would like to congratulate Christian for being selected as the only person in the whole country who gets to do this year. So do you want to share a little bit more about the opportunity?
Yeah, so this organization, I went to their conference last November, and they bring together all the different municipal forestry employees, people working in urban forestry specifically. And so they do an arborist exchange program where they will send someone to another city, and you can kind of learn what they're doing with their urban forestry program, what works, what doesn't work, and vice versa. They have one-way and two-way exchanges. This year it'll just be a one-way exchange since there's only one person they selected. So yeah, and I get to choose the city. It just depends on if they're part of the organization or not. So right now I'm working with them to see which, makes the most sense for what we're doing, policy or desert cities and things like that. So that'll most likely be in the fall. It's 1 week and fully funded. So
Congratulations.
So we'll have to add this to Christian's money getting total. He's shaming the rest of us. So, but we're very excited for him. So. I know, the leaderboard's gonna be pretty sad, yeah. It's like, whoop. So that was great news that we got today. So thank you for sharing, congratulations. And that is all that we wanted to pull out for the staff comment. I know there's a couple of different areas of interest that we're reporting on in the report that I think will be good for fall presentations. I know, like perhaps getting an update on from Desert Water on the California Conservation as a Way of Life regulations. They've offered to come back and do that sometime in the fall when their footing is a little more settled on it as well. That regulation set is still being refined and stuff as that goes along. Are there any other questions about topics that are not on the agenda that folks would like to ask about either the report or just kind of topic areas for staff? Yes, Vice Chair.
Just regarding the water, I do know Commissioner or Chair Clark and I had coffee with the president of Paul Ortega, and he mentioned that they're working on an ordinance to help kind of define functional and non-functional turf and various things. And I know it had been noted that staff is working on an assessment of the city's facilities. I'm just wondering if we can have that in conjunction with GWA
Sure, probably.
in the fall.
Yeah, that
Because
could
there was some concern from the water department on the city's water use.
There tends to be. So yes, that is something that we can probably work with our colleagues in the Public Works Department to do a concurrent conversation and have the staff level version of that conversation first and then bring it out to the commissioners to take a look. I know there's aggressive planning on turf reduction. You're going to continue to see an increasing rate of removal of non-functional turf in city facilities.
Following along with that, I know we've talked in the past about a project to bring recycled water into Sunrise Park.
Correct.
How is that going?
I don't have the day-to-day details because that's the kind of thing that I'm like, I love it when departments just go to town. They don't need me. So I'm not regularly part of those discussions. I believe everything's going fine. I think there was always a need identified for a little bit more grant funding to close out the project, but I believe it's proceeding. But I can get some additional details and bring that back to the commission in a future report. I don't want to misspeak on anything.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on the report? The staff report?
Yes.
Just minor, maybe we can talk offline about dates for July subcommittee meetings.
Okay, sure. No problem.
So that completes the director's report, and we move on to old business. The first item is the energy efficient upgrade ordinance.
Yes, so I'm going to give you a brief update. We're going to save most of the thunder for trees tonight, so you'll get a two-part brief update from me. So the first is that I think as I mentioned in our subcommittee meeting and in our last meeting, we've been working on ingesting some of the feedback from this commission, from various stakeholders in the construction community, and in various other parts of the community, from the tribe. The broad feedback that we got, you may remember Juliette's presentation on our key design criteria for the next round, is make it simpler and make it more discreet where we can. So where it's possible to make things very easy to follow, do so. So we have just finished the next draft that we're now going to start, reviewing and socializing slowly, which attempts to do that. It's really funny because in an attempt to make it simpler, it gets longer. So don't yell at me. It does have an additional page now, but it does make it more clear. And so Juliette has been working on summary documents for that to just kind of outline different processes and what the changes are. And so we'll be bringing that back probably in the early fall to this commission, but the subcommittee will probably see it a little bit sooner. So that's the main thing that we've been working on with the ordinance itself. So continuing with the flex path points framework, but taking some of those edge cases that were more difficult or seemed maybe overly complex and adding some streamlined pathways for some of those. So we look forward to bringing that back. Hopefully it answers and resolves some of the feedback and concerns we were getting. We are attempting to make everyone's lives easier while still reducing our carbon emissions and maintaining consumer choice. So that's kind of the design criteria there. And then with regards to AB 306, so y'all will remember that's the bill that maybe preempts the doing of REACH codes for the whole state and also preempts the building code cycle for almost 10 years. So the letter was sent over from the commission and acknowledged and received by the Senate staff from our representative, our senators, and then also the authors of the bill. The Senate has not yet scheduled a hearing. However, we got news about 2 hours ago that it looks like this will actually be included as what's called a budget trailer bill, which is not great news because when something becomes a budget trailer bill, it's kind of like it gets thrown into this omnibus thing and it's attached as part of a broader package. So the Assembly has decided to not really pull it from consideration in the Senate, but to include it in their sort of bill that has all of their housing wish lists. And so in order to not approve it, it either gets negotiated out in the budget negotiations or would require the disapproval of that entire section of the budget, which is unlikely to happen. So usually becoming part of a budget trailer bill means that something is probably getting scooted through without a lot of scrutiny and discussion. There was a lot of building feedback and support to senators that was definitely slowing the progression of the legislation. So hearing that it's now a budget trailer bill is not the best. There was an amendment introduced in the language that was published at like 4 o'clock this morning that does allow for certain amendments to the local amendments to the building code in response to local general plans that have committed to certain aspects of climate action. We're still waiting to hear from all of the lawyers in our orbit about whether that provision would allow for us to proceed with an existing buildings REACH code. What it looks like is it's really intended to carve out for jurisdictions that have REACH codes that encourage all electric new construction, which is something we'll probably get to at some point, although due to some Ninth Circuit Court decisions, we can't ban gas in new buildings in California. But doesn't really solve the conundrum at hand, which is what do we do with our existing buildings? So we're waiting to see if maybe that gives us enough room to kind of squeeze through what we want to get through, but it doesn't resolve the local control issues, it doesn't resolve the safety issues, it doesn't resolve the climate responsiveness issues for things that we might want to do anytime over the next decade, which is an extremely long time in climate policy terms. So the sort of the community is kind of trying to figure out how to tackle the new inclusion in this new bill type. There's going to be a budget hearing tomorrow morning. Those budget hearings are very long. So I know there's a flurry of letters going out from different cities this evening. We are circulating a letter to the city council currently, or not yet circulating to the city council, but we're preparing a letter internally to see if we can get some sign off on that. But that's kind of where we're at. So things were looking kind of good until 3:30. and now they're looking bad. But anything can change very quickly in state legislation. So that's where I will park that update, and I will pause for any questions.
Any questions? No?
Okay.
Thank you. The next, which we've been waiting for, is the tree ordinance by Specialist Wheeler. And we got a good preview of this in the subcommittee meeting 2 weeks ago.
Okay, so I hope you guys noticed that you haven't received the actual ordinance yet. So we're still waiting for sign off for 2 departments, but we just got one actually fire signed off today. And so we're just waiting on one more meeting with code enforcement before we publish the actual ordinance. So, but there are some updates to this. So we're describing this as management of public and private trees. It's going to be an addition to the Palm Springs Municipal Code, and it's going to be added to Title 11, which is Peace, Morals, and Safety. It'll consist of 2 chapters, public tree management and private tree management. And in this title, there are kind of similar ordinances such as our public nuisances, wildlife protection, and our water conservation ordinances. So this kind of seemed like the best fit where to put the ordinance. So a little recap of the ordinance itself and what's in it. So this applies to city properties and commercial properties, so businesses, HOAs, and multifamily properties that usually have to submit an approved landscape plan to planning. This establishes a group of protected trees. That's a typo right there. It should be protected trees and not protected species. So these are going to be trees with a trunk diameter of 12 inches or more, and those designated by the city manager. It's going to establish criteria for removal, so certain scenarios under which trees can be removed. And then it's also going to add a replacement condition, so 2-to-1 replacement for protected trees and 1-to-1 for all other trees. So protected trees, we're describing that as trees with a DBH diameter at breast height of 12 inches or greater, so that would impact roughly 3,800 city-managed shade trees and roughly 8,000 trees total if we're counting palm trees. And then this can also be designated by the city manager of trees that have substantial importance. So things with cultural importance or ecological importance. So this could be native trees if the city decides in the future they want to protect any type of native tree regardless of how big they are. And the diameter at breast height is the height, it's 4.5 feet from the ground and measure at the tree trunk. So removal criteria, so which scenarios is someone allowed to remove a tree? So it's unsuitable to the planting area, either it's too small or it's too close to a building. It negatively impacts the public right-of-way or visibility. Removal is necessary for the development of the site. There are trees that make more sense for that area. Think if a tree is too large to be under power lines and things like that, or if the tree is diseased or in decline or dead. So the replacement conditions, what are the conditions for replacing a tree? So protected trees need to be replaced at a 2-to-1 ratio. So 2 trees replaced for every 1 removed. This is going to be only 1-to-1 for palm trees. And palm trees, we're implementing that those are only replaced in like-for-like scenarios, so you can't replace a shade tree with a palm tree. And then the replacements must be from the recommended species list. And I just want to note that palm trees make up over 50% of the city's tree inventory. So with this, we'll have a few supporting documents and resources: the recommended species list, the city's urban forestry website, and a technical manual. And then today, I would like to show you the recommended species list. It's just in the draft form, and the city's urban forestry website, which is also a draft. So it's not quite publicly available yet. So this is a rough draft of the recommended species list. There are over roughly about 115 different species. So we have the common name, the botanical name, what type of foliage, if it's evergreen or deciduous, or a mix of both, the maximum height, the maximum width, planter width, the average growth rate a year, inches a year, if it can cause damage to infrastructure, like if its roots can lift up sidewalks, things like that, if it's compatible with overhead utility lines, and the water requirements. And all of these range from very low to moderate for the water requirements. And so you can see that California fan palm and Mexican fan palm are highlighted because that does make up a significant portion of our inventory, and those should be only replaced when you're removing that same species. Any questions on this?
So I'm wondering if you don't have anything, let's say on a lot, you can put a palm tree or a shade tree. There's no restriction if you don't have anything.
Yes, you would have to go through zonings, what they require for their ground covering. This ordinance is only focused on removing trees and replacing
that's what I
trees.
thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
so you can plant palm trees if you would like, but you still have to go through planning and what they require.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, they have certain shade cover requirements depending on the type of property. So you'd have to meet your shade cover, and that's based on the canopy of the tree.
I just wanted to clarify, so this initial ordinance is for city-owned properties and properties that have to go through, that have landscape design plans, like HOAs and stuff.
Yes.
So single family, how I am assuming that if I add a tree, it's a recommendation to use these guidelines, correct?
Yes, but this wouldn't cover, they wouldn't be impacted by code enforcement for the replacement and removal. They will be impacted still for public nuisance, which is already in the code for like if a tree is dead or dying because it's a safety hazard and things like that, so.
Is it possible to get a copy of that? I
Yeah,
know it's not
yeah.
approved
can
yet, but. I
Get a
just wanna
copy
get
of that. And I will add that, so we're working with West Coast Arborists on this, and they will be adding a kind of like comment section to the side where it'll note whether it's native, whether it does good in wind, whether it's, the Climate Action Subcommittee brought up, you know, if it needs a lot of trimming or constant maintenance. So kind of little tidbits like that to help people decide if it's flowering and different things like that, so.
I know that a large number of the palm trees in Southern California are not native palm trees. Does this distinguish between those types of palm trees?
No, not at the moment, but can be possible if that's something the commission would like.
I think the Washington palm is native, I think.
Yeah, the species list does break them down by palm species.
Yes.
So those are indicated separately on the list.
Yes. And that will be marked as native, the California fan palm. And if,
It's not related only because it's in my neighborhood. Mobile home parks are not quite the same as other, as condo complexes or things like that. They don't have landscape requirements, so apparently you can't regulate what they do. I get, that's a statement, I guess.
yeah.
That's correct. So those are regulated under a very different regulatory regime. They are not currently, I believe, required to submit landscape plans.
Right.
So again, these resources will be available. To Vice Chair Rotner's point, if someone would like to pull from the recommended species list, they are absolutely welcome to do so. Those are trees that are probably more likely than others to do well in our environment.
Right.
And this will be publicly available, so even people that don't have to adhere to this can still use it as a recommendation. Yep. So if there's no more questions on this, I will move to.
It's related to Ken's question. If you plant a tree, if you have a vacant lot, or not a vacant lot, but a non-landscape lot, and you plant a tree, and then when you go to take out that tree, does the rule apply to start then apply?
If it was a process that goes through planning, so if it was a commercial property like an HOA or multifamily,
All right.
yeah.
Okay.
But not a single family home that doesn't go through the approved landscape process.
So if you're in a condo complex and you're going to be putting in trees on your piece of property, it's advisable to look at the list before you do it.
Yes, and I'm sure planning will point people to the list so they have a guide of something.
Okay.
But just the technicality there being, I know it depends on the HOA, it depends on the condo complex. If you have a private piece of property that is not part of that approved landscape plan, just because you're in an HOA doesn't mean you're automatically subject to it. Only if your property, like some property is completely commonly managed, it's all on the landscape plan, in which case you're subject. If there's common areas and then private areas, those private areas may or may not be subject. It depends on whether they're on the landscape plan. But yes, once it goes on the plan, then it is subject to the rules.
Yes. Are there any more questions? Comments? So I've been working with our GIS team on making a website for the city's urban forestry program. So here's a little preview of it. So it's going to go through the benefits of trees and about the city's inventory. So highlights a few benefits: runoff, energy, pollution, capture, CO2, capture. And then it kind of breaks down the inventory a bit, just gives the highlights of the numbers. These numbers are not fully updated yet, so this data is roughly there, but still needs to add some. And then there will be maps that also go along with it. So this is what will be our inventory dashboard, where you can see where all the city maintained and city managed trees are. Eventually we'll add to this the different kind of, so we'll add the 1PS GIS layer, so you can see in your neighborhood, how many trees you have, things like that, or different zoning layers, or even different council districts, so you can see how they compare with each other. And you'll be able to click on a dot and see what type of tree it is, see how big it is, and see its value as well. See the address. And then you can see down below just the rough, spread of the different sizes of trees that we have. So you click on, this tree has a diameter of 27 inches, so we have a decent amount of those, of large trees. And this is a similar mechanism to the first one. It just shows it in a different format. So also a part of this, we'll have a section where people can click and volunteer once we start doing more urban forestry outreach events and different things like that, or planting events. They can sign up and become a volunteer. And then we have different resources, so benefits of trees, why topping is not good for trees, tree care for birds and other wildlife, links to the turf removal and water efficient landscape guide. Scrolling down, we'll also have frequently asked questions. We're still working on this. These are mostly just fillers to show you guys, but right now you can see our top 10 species, and the top 2 are palm trees. Yeah, so any type of commonly asked question we can just put here so people don't have to dig that deep for it. That's about it. And we'll link the recommended species list and the technical manual once we get that as well.
The top 10 is just the number of trees that are in the city, or just in terms of total? It's like, what's the,
Those are just the top, the top 10 species are the, we have a lot of those species. Yeah.
In the city's collection of trees,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
are the trees that we own.
Is. And I will note, this does not cover privately maintained trees. We are working on seeing if we can compile data from approved landscape plans, are getting people to just fill out a survey and tell us, what trees they have in their yard. So eventually we can kind of know the total of trees that we have in the city, public and private.
It would seem that it might be advisable to have some discussion of fire hazard in this website. I didn't see any mention of it there.
Yes.
Would that include something like closeness to buildings? Would that include things like how far they can be from buildings?
That's what I would assume, that it would include distancing and things like that, recommendations to
Yeah,
make it desirable to have trees, but also safe.
Yes.
We can include the fire department's vegetation management guidelines. They have best practices for particular, like specific to the high fire areas, and then also just in general. So we can include that.
Any more questions on the website?
I just have a comment. It's very cool. Well done. I like all the data maps.
Yeah, our GIS team was really excited to get their hands on this too. So it's been a great
Yeah.
collaboration between our departments. Yeah, absolutely. Just scrolling and zooming. And the West Coast Arborist GIS team as well.
Any other questions?
I just want to commend you also that the mapping is very interesting, and I like the fact that you put the value of trees, because that gets buy-in from the community about the value of our trees. So I think that was very good to include that.
Thank you. That's what we're trying to get. Show people that trees are valuable.
I do have just a ballpark question. The 46 million that you had up there, is that ballpark?
It's actually a little bit more from the most
Nice.
recent. We're just trying to add the new updated 2024 data. So that a lot of this is based off of the 2014, but we do have the new data. The GIS team is just making sure that it all comes together. Yep.
So how do you actually determine value of a tree?
I think they determine it just by its size, its ecological value. They have their own kind of formula for it. Yeah. How much CO2 it captures. Yeah. So as a tree ages, it becomes more valuable. So that's why it's nice to let trees get to their whole lifespan.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Christian. And I guess there was a request that you send the charts to the commissioners?
Yes, I can send that to you guys.
Thank you.
Christian, do you want to just kind of give a highlight of your next steps on this?
Yes, so we're going to have a meeting with code enforcement to kind of figure out the internal process and making sure that everything that's in the ordinance as it stands now looks good and feels good for them to enforce. And then we will also so most of the staff has reviewed the species list, but we're waiting to get the technical manual back for them to see. And we kind of want to take everything that we have to support this when we go to council. So we're expecting maybe fall because we want the website to be done as well. And then we're also going to be working with Public Works to kind of figure out a goal for planting, because we do have a lot of vacant spots that previously had trees in them. So kind of figuring that out too as we expand it.
Actually, I have a question. What about irrigation? Are there places where irrigation will have to be added, presumably in places like parks where there's spray irrigation that covers the trees, but will there have to be attention to special irrigation in certain places?
Yes, as we are adding trees to areas, yeah, there will need to be irrigation. Yeah, I think the city uses drip irrigation, but I'm hoping for some of the replacement, because we do have a lot of vacant spots where there were trees. Hoping that they won't have to add new, so they can kind of focus on that area first, if the irrigation is still functioning and working for those trees. So,
Okay, thank you.
Also an issue we encourage folks to keep in mind when they do a turf conversion. So making sure that you do have water that's going directly to that tree. So we are taking grass out of a lot of city facilities, so there will probably need to be, it goes from being kind of more a general spray and pray irrigation to more targeted. So it probably changes, but may or may not result in an increase in water use.
And actually, the Desert Water Agency requires for turf conversion to get the rebate that you have drip irrigation and that it's less than 0.3 gallons per minute, I believe, and they do check for that.
And I will also note that, yeah, how to plant and irrigate will be in the technical manual. And then some of the different, some of the commercial properties in this will be subject to the water efficient, or what is it called? MWALO?
Water efficient landscape
Yeah,
ordinance.
that. So,
Great. Thank you very much. A lot of really good work. The final item under old business is the sustainability budget. We talked about it at the last meeting. The council discussed the budget at the June 11th meeting, and we'll finalize it at the meeting tomorrow. I don't know if there's much to add. It seemed like that they accepted the budget as you had, the sustainability budget as presented the last time, but are there any updates?
Sure. So I never want to count chickens before they hatch. So I'm going to be tapping on all of my talismans and various grounding mechanisms because we're one of the only groups to have come out of the budget with a little bit of money to spend, which there's a reason why that's true. So just to summarize, those who have not been keeping up with all of the words of the budget discussions, it is a tighter two-year budget this year than we've had in the past. There's a number of different pressures on the budget. We don't need to get into those here. You all are probably relatively familiar with what those are. But particularly our general fund is under a lot of pressure. So the goal is to basically freeze or reduce where tactically possible spending in our general fund. However, close students of this commission will remember we don't come out of the general fund. We have special revenue funds that come from basically the waste franchise fees. So anytime we have a franchise agreement with a provider of a utility service, so for example, Palm Springs Disposal in this case, those franchise agreements normally have some sort of percentage that comes back to the city to cover like our costs for operating that franchise. So since we are the department that manages the waste franchise, we get a decent amount of that franchise fee to use for our own spending. There were a couple of years where not a lot of spending was done. Our department's also grown a lot in the past couple of years. So we had some balance in our fund balance. That is why we have money to spend. It is not coming from the general fund. It's coming from savings effectively over the past probably roughly 5 fiscal years in those fund balances. So I'm going to talk about, how do I want to talk about this? Basically 3 categories of information about the budget. Some of this is going to be a refresher from last time. So regular spending. So that's things like making sure that the porta potties at the household hazardous waste facility are maintained, making sure that we have resources to do events, things like, charging the fleet vehicle, that kind of our regular day-to-day spending. That money is also this year going to be pulling from our fund balances. So because in the past, the general fund has helped to support our salary costs, that money is not available this year. So we are doing a bit of deficit spending to cover our kind of regular routine costs. And that includes everything from leaf blower rebates to, making sure that we're getting people to the SEEK conference. So all of that regular nuts and bolts spending is coming from that. So we're being pretty mindful about that and trying to be creative about how we work with other departments and entities to help co-fund things. Whereas in the past, we might have been able to absorb some more of those costs. We're just going to be a little more thoughtful about that so we don't go too far into our balance. So that's that category. So that's going to support staff salaries, and day-to-day nuts and bolts spending. Then we have $1 million allocation, which was pulled from those fund balances, which is intended to cover two things. One is continuation of the turf conversion rebate match with DWA. And the other is a new low-income home energy efficiency program that builds on the city's existing home repair program. So the DWA stuff you all are pretty familiar with. Based on kind of wherever the final match numbers come in, we'll probably continue to put in somewhere around $1 per square foot. But the council has not been specific about how much of that million goes to each program. So that's something that we're working on with Desert Water to kind of try to forecast how much money we think we're gonna, how much demand is there in the next couple of fiscal years, where is the right amount of money to allocate from that pot. We did allocate $1 million total over the last 2 fiscal years. We will come very close to spending exactly that, which is great. I think we might have like a, $35,000 or something that we try to move into a previous year. Don't quote me on that number, but most of it will be allocated to projects in this fiscal year, which is great. So that means that 2-year demand was roughly correctly estimated. So we obviously won't be able to do that again this year because we do want to put some significant money into this new program. So we'll figure out the right place to set that. So the second piece, the low-income home energy efficiency program, grows out of the fact that in the REACH code, those, assuming that's adopted in the future, low-income residents are largely exempted from that. So anybody paying the care and FARA rate, also generally, anybody paying the care and FARA rate is automatically exempted. And there's a number of different other exemptions that mean that some of our low-income residents won't be realizing the benefits of some of that home energy efficiency because they're not necessarily triggered to do so, and also because it can be expensive upfront to do. So that's why we're going to be going in and looking to do basically maximizing the energy efficiency of homes that we're going in and repairing. So looking at the appropriate systems that we want to upgrade, kind of using our measures list from the REACH code as a guide, and also really helping us to build up a demonstration set of homes in Palm Springs that are kind of what that home of the future should look and feel like. So what does it mean to have a really climate positive home that has removed the maximum amount of fossil fuels, that's maxed out on the insulation, that's using the appropriate reflectance and fenestration on all the different things. So it's kind of twofold. One is making sure that those residents get the benefits of those well-sealed, healthy homes, and then helping us understand what do those bill impacts look like in the summer? Are people saving money? Are people, are costs shifting to different parts of the year because we've done fuel switching? Really getting, using a program that we can support to help us understand and give better data and feedback to people, understanding where our contractor base is maybe thin or strong, understanding what is easy versus hard to install here. So that's something we're really excited about. You may also remember that Councilmember Bernstein mentioned, since he's the chair of the DCE board, Desert Community Energy is also putting $500,000 in, as was just approved in their budget, to support REACH code programs. So some of that will go to support this program because it's basically building out and kind of pre-adopting and testing the REACH code. We anticipate also that a good chunk of that will go to just providing more traditional rebates, so kind of what you might expect from your utility company, to people who are doing measures that are not yet required because the REACH code hasn't passed yet, but they'll be able to get some funding in some sort of rebate structure back to help them do that. We haven't finalized the ink on any of that yet because the city budget is not approved until tomorrow. So I don't want to, I hesitate to make news in this meeting because there's a lot still to be determined there, but we do anticipate putting some dollars into supporting people looking to improve the energy efficiency and carbon and climate efficiency of their homes in the next 2 fiscal years. So that's that $1 million allocation. And then I'll just close off by summarizing quickly the impact of the soft hiring freeze at the city council, or that is part of the budget on our department. So we are currently on freeze for our additional staff line. We also have our beloved Juliet, who will be completing her fellowship at the end of August. So we're waiting to see how all those things shake out. But currently those things do impact our department currently. How many times can I say the word currently in one sentence? And that's it. That's all I have to report, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes.
Okay, going back to the low-income housing allocation, is there, and I may have missed this, so I apologize, is that going to be included in the energy efficient ordinance? I mean, is there wording or a description of how that's going to be run, or is it too early for that?
Good question. So we will leave that out of the ordinance. I tend to try to not legislate programs if we can help it. So I don't think there's a requirement at this point for it to have like legislative. Obviously, the city council will hear about the program. They'll have to approve the spending of the money and different things. So it will be approved by the city in some format in order to be able to execute the work. But since it's something that we'd like to be able to have flexibility to modify over time, and we don't currently have enough money to make it available to anybody who would like to have it. So it's depending on how we decide to set up the program, could be anywhere from 10 amazing homes, that's unlikely, to a couple hundred. So, but that doesn't really get to everybody. So I wouldn't want to put something in the legislation. I think that wouldn't cover everyone.
So currently there's no document that kind of lays it all out?
No,
Or
not
you're
yet. We're working on that.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I'm just
we've
curious.
been hesitant
It'd be good to see.
Yeah. No, we're really excited to do it. So we wanted to make sure that everything gets approved in the budget. You know, so far I think people have been pretty excited about the work and the potential of it. But you know, things can change in a difficult budget environment very quickly. So we'll have to see. But probably sometime in the fall is when we'll anticipate bringing some material on that back, kind of around the time we bring back the next version of the REACH code.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Hearing none. Thank you.
I did
That-
neglect to mention that we do have the Heat and Shade grant that Christian won, and also the Save Streets grant. So that spending will also be happening. But anything related to the tree ordinance or any of the other programs like events and community engagement that Ben's working on, that comes out of that like deficit spending bucket that I mentioned first, which we have enough. We'll be okay.
And the council did acknowledge the heat and shade study in their
Correct.
budget.
They did, yes.
Okay. So that ends the items under old business. We have nothing under new business. So we move on then to commissioner comments and July agenda items. So we'll do as we normally do, just in this case, go down the line, not around the table. And if anybody has any comments, additional comments or suggestions for future items on the agenda, please bring them up. And I have a few that I'll bring up when we get to me. Okay, Commissioner Frick?
I don't know if this has been discussed before, but there's been a lot of paving going on in town with the black asphalt that is very, very hot. And is there any discussion or ideas around pavement that is not a heat sink like that, that can sort of reduce heat in neighborhoods? Just curious.
Sure, it's a great question. The data is a little mixed currently on effectiveness of some of the things that have been out and about for the past like 5-10 years or so, but that is something that I imagine will come up in the heat and shade study, since that's specifically looking at that transportation intersection and whether you're getting a lot of heat radiating at you from the street is a determining factor on whether you ride your bike on it or not. Like, you know, so I think that's the kind of thing that will come out a little bit in that. I'm sure that at some point before my time, there has been some conversation about trying some of the different pavement types, but I think we're using our second or third mover advantage and realizing that the industry hasn't really congealed around the best way to do that for our environment. But definitely more shade trees in the interim and thinking about some of those other plantings, but definitely open to continuing to look at that. But I think unless you have anything else to add there, I think heat and shade would be where it would come up.
Yes, I agree. I mean, we can ask our engineering department if they've, know of anything or heard of anything. That might be something we should try if we get some extra grant funding or something.
Yeah, I just think that there's a lot of materials that are being invented, and it's something to look into to see what's on the market now. Because I just know, I bike all over town, and during the summer, the heat radiating off the black pavement is just intense. And I know Phoenix and Tucson were looking into some of these issues about, the heat increase in urban centers. And so I think that might be something that we should look into also.
Yep, that will continue to come back up, but we can bring back some more specific info, probably early fall, include that in the staff memo or do a presentation.
sorry. That's actually something of, I think it's Public Works. We actually set them up last week, I believe. They had their meeting with recycled cold mix asphalt. With, I believe, what is that place? Do you recall their names?
There was someone we met at the vendor fair.
Yes, it's called the Road Soup. So it's supposed to be a lot cooler asphalt, and I know they got a couple bags that they dropped off with Public Works to be able to use it and see how it works out for them. So they are working on something close to that.
Thank you. Before we move on, I just wanted to make a comment at our Climate Action Subcommittee meeting earlier this month when we were discussing the heat and shade study and Director McCloy was leading the discussion. One point she made, which I thought was very profound, and I put in the notes from the meeting, I think you should think about is one key question to be answered in the heat and shade study is how do people modify or not modify their travel patterns because of heat? And that fits into the discussion that we just had. And that will be a strong theme of the study. Okay. Commissioner Boyd? None? Commissioner Alexander?
Nothing.
Commissioner Barrett?
I think the opening discussion from the public about Fix-It is something we might want to try to include in something we do. It's a model of waste reduction.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and so Benito is working really closely with that group on putting on the August event. So I imagine we'll have a good presentation on that probably at the September meeting. Maybe you can give like a little summary, and we can talk more about the waste diversion potential in September.
Thank you. Commissioner Rotner, Vice Chair Rotner?
Nothing, just tagging on to Commissioner Frick and the importance of the heat. I know there's a article, if I can dig it up, that was that I read about Phoenix and their efforts to try and reduce, and I can share that with everyone. I have a lot of stuff. Anyway, other than that, no. You know, you read stuff and you save it and then can't find it.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you all. See, there are just a few things that we've had on our future list that potentially will be discussed at our July or September meetings. Palm Springs Disposal Services report on recycling compliance, CV Link status. I think we've already mentioned earlier another report from Desert Water Agency about the ordinances that will be affecting us. And we should reschedule the Palm Springs Fire Department's high-risk fire areas presentation as soon as possible. So we traditionally have a planning meeting the Thursday following every commission meeting to talk about the agenda for the next meeting. I can put the agenda together, but I will not be available on Thursday. I have a new thing that I'm working on relating to STEM, and that's taking my time up on mornings this week. So, but I'll send the draft agenda to the staff and Bernard, and then you can have the meeting. So hearing if there are any other comments. Do you like our new room?
No.
It's pretty fancy.
Yeah, normally the planning commission has it on our normal night, so you'll have to arm wrestle them if you want to use it again, but maybe on some off nights.
Okay. And we did determine that July 22nd, which is the fourth Tuesday, is suitable to the majority for the next meeting. So the Sustainability Commission will adjourn to the next meeting on July 22nd, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I motion.
Second? Okay. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.